So my question is, can food be used as a forum for cultural sharing? I wanted to explore this idea with the view to using it as a setting for a workshop for international students. It's been evidenced that there is an integration issue, and students do feel a little bit isolated, and I felt that I could use food as a good way of breaking down the barriers to try and give some cultural validation and also develop a sense of community and build a community through it as well. So I did several interventions and through that gained a lot of stories, a lot of sharing. It seemed to attract people of that interest, and they all had stories to tell, and I've collated those stories, and there seems to be a thread of past memoirs. So that's really what I'm going to try and draw on, is the memoirs, and build those stories from there. My next step was to establish who my research would benefit and also who could assist me. So I started looking into possible stakeholders and approached the Language Centre, as I know they already hold workshops. And not having held workshops myself before, I felt like I needed some guidance. So I went along and I actually met with Maya Wilhelm. She came up with a very interesting point, and that was that in different cultures there are different levels of sharing. And that may be a challenge within my workshop, that, for instance, in Western culture, we're taught to share and it's okay, but in some cultures from the young are expected to not share so much. And I guess that instills itself and carries through, and maybe it could be a barrier that could be overcome through the workshop. Coronavirus happened, so that's changed my direction in my project. Initially I felt a bit deflated. What will I do? My project is about sharing and it's about culture, and mostly the sharing through being in the same environment. However, after a week or so, I started to see things happen. Digitally, a lot of sharing was going on. Through my kids, I saw TikToks and different websites coming up, party sites and so on. And more importantly, what else can you do when you're locked down in a home? There's very few things you can do, and cooking and food is one of them. And so I saw a lot of sharing starting to go on, images, recipes, so much. So I thought, great, I can embrace this. And so I did. I drew up a monkey survey and sent that out to try and get some feedback and get some data as well on what people are using, why they use it, are they still using traditional learnings from books for recipes, where do they get their recipes from, the cultural side of it as well, the fusion of the different cultures, and so on. And I received a lot of data back. Off the back of that, I've realised that maybe that's the way forward in my next interventions. So I'm putting together a digital workshop. So that's my next step. Everyone has a story to tell. It seems to be the underlying theme and link to all my exploration and research. In light of my findings that social media has globalised food sharing, the question is, do these posts actually show a story or narrative? They do give an insight into people's lives, but looking closer, there is no narrative to be seen, in particular a cultural one. Where does my project go from here? I will still take forward the use of food as a focus. I'm also aware that each story will be a different format. For example, a sound recording, a writing, a video, social media. What will be interesting is how I can make this work with a new social media wave that is happening currently. Can I link the two? This was born from my parents' story of them arriving in England in the late 1960s. I guess I found their stories of that time magical. It was a whole new exciting time. Everything was new and fresh, and although I did not live in that moment, I wish I did. My imagination goes wild when I hear their experiences, and I envisage in my head a movie with a soundtrack of that era, with the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, with other, the political and global changes that were going on, like the moon landing, the fashion revolution, Vivienne Westwood, Mary Quant, Bieber. I see all these influences in their photos. I know that this is looking at it through rose-tinted glasses, but it is what sowed that seed in my head that I would one day write a fictional book based on that time and their experience, with the dream that it could be a movie with a soundtrack and styling that is playing in my head. Realising that this is where my interests lie, and having established that food breaks down barriers for cultural sharing, I'm reframing my research. I'm no longer focusing on students, but I'm more interested in getting stories and experiences of people who have moved to the UK from different countries. I have done a full loop, as right at the beginning of my research, I started off by finding a local area that had a selection of food outlets from around the globe. I was planning to interview them and get their stories. I shelved this idea because I felt that I needed to pin my research to serving a cause and having a purpose, hence focusing on students to help integration. I also explored this food route, as food is my passion, and I would like this experience to form some stepping stone into the industry. Going through this reflection and analysis process has been valuable. It seemed at times my actions were aimless. It has made me step out and look at what I have done from above and helped me join the dots and see the threads of what I've been doing.